Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this crip?
Welcome back to Posting Through It. I'm Jared.
And I'm Mike.
I had a great time in Alaska, but I should be back for about the rest of the summer. That might be the last break for a little bit, but we've got some fun episodes for you guys coming up this summer, including this one, which is all about the MAGA right's reaction to the release, or I guess non-release, of the rumored Jeffrey Epstein Files. As always, you can find a link to the tip jar we have set up in the episode description. You can throw us a buck or two here or there. It helps the show keep going, and we appreciate it a ton. Every time I get an email that says somebody's thrown in a couple bucks, even if it's just $1, it makes me feel validated, like we're doing something here that people are finding value in. So thank you for all of that. Before we bring in Will Sommer to talk about the reactions to the non-release of more Jeffrey Epstein files, I thought it would be useful for us to walk through kind of exactly what happened there and just some background on that situation so that anybody who does not already have worms in their brain can have an adequate amount of worms before we start talking to Will. So let's hit the brakes, throw it in reverse, and cover our bases here.
You got your bucket list, your grocery list, your list of things to do. You got a list of all your wishes, that's a wish list, dude. You got your Amazon and Santa Claus and Tooth Fairy too. But I know a list that don't exist, and buddy, so do you. It's the Epstein list, it's a mystery list with a twist. It's a myth of a list that we all just miss. Be an optimist, not a pessimist. If you wish to persist, it's probably best you forget that list.
Jeffrey Epstein, or as I like to call him, Jeff Ep, was a financier born and raised in New York City. In the mid-1970s, he started working at Bear Stearns, a Wall Street investment bank, and in 1982 went on to create his own firm, which reportedly managed individual and family fortunes of clients with $1 billion or more. Who he managed money for largely remains a mystery to this day, apart from Leslie Wexner, a billionaire retail tycoon behind the brands like Bath and Body Works and Victoria's Secret. He bought properties in Florida, New Mexico, and New York and ran in social circles that connected him to the world's elite class, politicians, celebrities, business leaders, and so on. He ran his business from a private island in the Caribbean off St. Thomas. He had a fleet of private planes.
Despite the fact he was running with high-profile people, Presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, the magician David Copperfield, Prince Andrew, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, actor Kevin Spacey, lawyer Alan Dershowitz, late New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, former Vice President Al Gore, the list goes on. He kept a pretty low profile for somebody at that level of society. He would not give interviews to the media. He reportedly did not use email. Profiles from the early 2000s noted his low profile, as if there was this air of mystique around his life and career. One quote I read in a publication likened him to Gatsby from the great Gatsby novels. Then in 2005, the parents of a 14-year-old girl told Florida police that Epstein molested her in his home in Palm Beach, Florida. Police found photos of girls throughout his house. According to some at the time, like columnist Michael Wolff, Epstein's proclivities, we should call them, I guess, for young girls was an open secret in the social circles he was a part of. In a 2002 article for New York Magazine, Donald Trump is quoted as saying, "He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side."
He struck a plea deal with federal prosecutors in 2008 that allowed him to avoid federal charges. It also ended an FBI investigation that sought to determine whether there were more victims or if other powerful people participated in his sex crimes against children. That deal was brokered by Alexandra Acosta, who was Secretary of Labor in the first Trump era. Despite all this, he kept his financial assets and his properties. Dozens of additional women accused Epstein of sexual abuse in 2018, prompting the Department of Justice to open a new investigation. In 2019, 11 years later, Epstein was arrested again on charges of sex trafficking underage girls. After he was denied bail, he was held in New York's Metropolitan Correctional Center prison in Lower Manhattan. It became clear he was going to spend at least 1 year in prison, and shortly after he died there. Medical examiners ruled his death a suicide, and federal officials said they found no reason to suspect foul play.
The public was not so convinced. Epstein was connected to a host of powerful figures who certainly might have an interest in making sure that the trial did not happen and that new information would never come to light. It was also confusing how his suicide even happened. Why was his cellmate moved out the day before he died? Where were the guards that were supposed to be watching him? What did surveillance video actually show? He'd apparently tried to kill himself weeks earlier, so how could this possibly have been allowed to happen? Many people, including countless right-wing media personalities who push anti-government conspiracy theories, took these questions to the extremes, floating a whole host of explanations as to what happened. Perhaps the Clintons had him murdered. Maybe Epstein had blackmail on powerful people who abused young girls with him. Maybe Epstein even kept a list of those people, and this was some kind of intelligence operation or some sort of clandestine thing.
We have no reason to believe that this client list that you see everybody talking about online exists. It could exist, but we have no reason to believe it necessarily. Reporters like Julie K. Brown, who's maybe best positioned journalist to weigh in on this matter, she broke a lot of stories on it. Her reporting in 2017 and 2018 was led to more charges against Epstein and identified nearly 80 of his victims. There is no Jeffrey Epstein client list, period. It's a figment of the internet's imagination and a means to just slander people, Brown said. Thanks to unsealed documents, people tied to Epstein are already known. The idea there is a secret, more damning list is likely a fantasy. It's a skeleton key type thing that animates a lot of conspiratorial thinking, that there's some smoking gun out there that can undo the whole web in one turn.
That said, there is still plenty of information we don't know about Epstein to this date. Much of it remains secret, classified inside the federal government. And when Epstein died, so did the chances of that material appearing at his trial. Many of the people who pushed these theories about Epstein, that there was a secret list that would implicate their political enemies, that the federal government and deep state was covering up what Epstein was doing, and that some powerful people might have had him murdered inside a prison. Well, those people are in charge of the government now.
Trump promised on the campaign trail in 2024 that if people elected him, he would declassify the case files. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, two influencers turned lawmakers, made their living in the last decade hawking a host of Epstein conspiracy theories and playing footsie with communities that peddle adjacent ones like QAnon. Well, they're running the FBI now. Exciting stuff if you're obsessed with Epstein and convinced that Trump is fighting the deep state.
So flash forward to February. Attorney General Pam Bondi paraded a group of 15 social media influencers, libs of TikTok, Rogan O'Handley, and at least two that promoted Pizzagate theories, Jack Posobiec and Mike Cernovich, in front of the White House with binders containing part 1 of the Epstein Files. It thrilled Trump supporters until they realized that the binders contained exactly 0 new revelations about Epstein, and that most of the documents they contained were already made public. MAGA diehards remember this day as Bindergate.
Trying to save face, Pam Bondi and Kash Patel promised the public that they were working to declassify more materials, which were under review. Patel said in a press release that at the time that there would be no cover-ups, no missing documents, and no stone left unturned. Bondi excited Trump fans further when she appeared to confirm the existence of a long-rumored client list that online conspiracists believe Epstein kept, telling a Fox News host that it was sitting on her desk to review.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen? It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
At a press briefing Monday, White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt seemed to imply that Bondi's previous comments were misunderstood. During a campaign meeting Tuesday, Bondi insisted she had only been referring to the Epstein client case file and not the Epstein client list. And Jared, I would like to note, there is a mini conspiracy here among Trump fans that when Karen Leavitt made that comment, she took off her cross necklace on purpose.
I saw that.
I love it. It's one of my favorite. It's probably my favorite little. It's like your favorite band that is not well known or whatever. That's my favorite conspiracy theory of 2025. That Karen Leavitt takes off her cross when she's telling lies.
Yeah, and that's only when. Oh my God, my brain is so poisoned with this stuff. I just get like QAnon slogans of like their symbolism will be their downfall. Like that is the first thing that pops in my head. Anyway, so months go by with no updates. Then in May, Kash Patel and FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino start to catch some flack from MAGA supporters after they said they agreed with the initial assessment that Epstein died by suicide. Billionaire Elon Musk claimed in June that the release was delayed because Trump was named in the Epstein Files, further stoking skepticism among MAGA supporters. Then last Monday, the FBI sent a 2-page unsigned memo to the DOJ stating it found no basis to release any more material, that a client list did not exist, and that Epstein didn't blackmail individuals who may have participated in acts of child sex abuse with him. Since then, the Trump White House line seems to be taking the tone of, oh, come on, aren't you sick of this shit? They're dismissive, combative, and tight-lipped about what happened.
Needless to say, Trump supporters were furious. Influencers who participated in February binder stunt at the White House fumed at the news. Rogan DC Drano O'Hanley has 2.2 million followers on X, claimed the Trump administration was engaged in a shameful cover-up to protect the most heinous elites. Jack Posobiec remarked that it was incredible how utterly mismanaged this Epstein mess has been. Cernovich urged Trump to change the situation. No one is believing the Epstein cover-up. This will be part of your legacy. Laura Loomer called on Bondi to resign for lying to the American people. Alex Jones, creator of InfoWars, said in a video posted on X that a 2-page memo made him want to throw up, and he appeared to be choking back tears.
I mean, it's just, you cannot see it any other way. So I just got to the office. I'm going to go throw up, actually. And this only happens every few years when something really, really bad happens or something. I mean, I'm physically going to puke probably right now. My mouth is watering right now. Because I have integrity. And, I just really need the Trump administration to succeed and to save this country, and they're doing so much good. And then for them to do something like this tears my guts out.
So, as we're recording today, countless MAGA personalities are calling on Pam Bondi to resign. It seems like she's the one they've decided needs to take the fall for all of this. And that's more or less, I think, where things are. On today's episode, we've brought on Will Sommer, a longtime friend of the show and a reporter for the Bulwark. Will is one of the foremost chroniclers of the MAGA movement and its media ecosystem. This is bound to be a really fun conversation, and you're not going to want to sleep on this one.
I'm not sleeping on anything. Want to know why? A few weeks ago, this brand called Magic Mind hit me up and said, hey, you got to try our shots. They'll help you get super focused. So I gave them a try, and honestly, I'm really into them. That's why I'm excited to bring them on as a sponsor. Magic Mind sells daily mental performance shots. In each 2-ounce bottle, you'll get a dose of 12 ingredients proven to boost neural function. Adaptogens to help with stress, L-theanine, and nootropics to support clearer thinking, a full daily dose of vitamin B, C, and D. The ingredients are nano-encapsulated, a process that makes it easier for your body to absorb the vitamins and nutrients you're paying for so they can work better. There's some real science behind Magic Mind, and if you use it more over time, you'll notice a positive difference.
Both Mike and I got samples of Magic Mind before we started running ads. After about a week of using the product, I was sold. I struggled with focusing at work for a while now. It always seemed like it would come to me in these little windows, and I would drink tons of coffee, energy drinks, whatever was around. I found ways of making it work so I could be productive, but I'd get jittery and anxious. And by the end of the day, man, I just felt really worn down. I was really putting my body through a lot. While using Magic Mind, my caffeine intake has plummeted because I just don't feel like I need it. I'm using less caffeine because Magic Mind is doing the work for me.
I recently used it while chasing a deadline for a magazine story and experienced exactly what Jared was talking about. Lots of energy and focus, no trouble sleeping, less jittery, less likely to grind my teeth and dream of gigantic desert worms while trying to sleep.
There are all kinds of scammy and sketchy supplements and products that claim to do what Magic Mind does. But Magic Mind is the real deal. Magic Mind is going to make this easy for you too, because there's a money-back guarantee if you don't like the product for whatever reason.
Try it and get 50% off your first subscription when you use the code THROUGHIT50 on magicmind.com. We'll put that in the episode description for you to find later. Insane 50% discount won't be around for long. Seriously, this is your chance to supercharge your productivity at a fraction of the price. And if you don't like it for whatever reason, there's a 100-day money-back guarantee. No questions asked. It doesn't even matter if you drank it all. There's no risk. Why not give it a try?
Give it a shot. If you don't like it, you'll get your money back. Let's get back to the episode. Joining and posting through it, we have Will Sommer. He's a senior reporter at the Bulwark, where he writes a newsletter called False Flag. Great name for a newsletter, Will.
Thank you.
He's also the author of the book Trust the Plan, which is all about the QAnon movement. It's a great read. Will is a friend of the show back when it was called Shitpost. Now posting through it. This has got to be probably your third or fourth time on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I we did it sometimes in your DC apartment. I mean, I remember, I'm an OG.
Oh, yeah,
right?
that little windowless room, man. Yeah. So first question for you, Will. I saw that Kash Patel's girlfriend has now gone public to insist that she's actually not an agent of Mossad. Can we get a fact check from you on this?
Well, I think she is definitely like a country singer, if I'm recalling correctly. She's a singer of some kind. So she's sort of an interesting character to add to the mix. But I think the allegation is that like she's Jewish and maybe she says she's Christian, but she has like, I guess kind of dark features or brunette hair. And so people are like, well, obviously she's Mossad. And this is why Kash is running cover on the Epstein case.
There are definitely no Christians with dark features, right? Like there's no like people from Latin America, anything like that. I mean, who have dark features who happen to be also Christian.
So it seems like things are going really well for them on this whole Epstein stuff, given those kind of public statements. But I think before we dive deep on Epstein and how the MAGA movement has been reacting to it, we should zoom out a bit.
Let's talk about some stuff here. I know Will also, and I also was in that windowless room with you, Jared, way back in the day. And yeah, and when I first became aware of Will's reporting, it was around the time that Pizzagate was starting to become a bigger and bigger phenomenon. And in fact, I remember writing stories about it at the time and linking to I think it's in the Washingtonian. Is that what you're writing for?
Washington City paper long ago.
Oh,
yes,
Washington City paper. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I think that was like the first stories, and I think you like were in touch with the management there and everything else, James Alefantis. And I'm just curious about that time. Do you feel like it just sort of, the obsession with pedophilia just sort of came out of nowhere? Did it just sort of come like directly from influencers like Mike Cernovich, Jack Posobiec, the people who are sort of pushing it the most? Or was this something that was always in MAGA?
That's a great question. I think, on one hand, I am tempted to say, and I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that I think Pizzagate was probably the moment where like the idea of like a democratic pedophile ring really like became mainstream on the right, or even on sort of like the fringe right. Obviously I think, people love to say like, we can look at the satanic panic and, say there are these kind of antecedents we could look at. I mean, I think even culturally, we could look at like To Catch a Predator as like the idea of like pedophiles. And I certainly know that like on 4chan, they would like track certain pedophiles and stuff like that. But I think like as like what we look at now as like the Epstein mania or what was QAnon, stuff like this, I think really like Pizzagate is kind of like the most obvious like recent moment that began.
Everybody, I assume, who's listening to this has some idea about Pizzagate, but like the short of it is that there was this kind of like, I don't know, sometimes it was layered with Satanism, sometimes there was anti-Semitic elements. It was malleable basically. But there was this idea that this restaurant that often hosted Democrats had a pedophilia dungeon at the bottom of it. And this, of course, like appeared in the emails related to Hillary Clinton's campaign. I was like, Jared, what do you remember about that time and just like the way pedophilia was kind of portrayed by the right then?
I mean, I always kind of put myself in the shoes of the truest believers of conspiracy theories. That's sort of where I start in trying to understand them and like what that means to them, right? So in the mind of somebody that followed Pizzagate or believes in Pizzagate or followed QAnon, and which had a lot of similar themes, but was definitely distinct. This is like the ultimate bad thing that your political opposition can do. This is not calling them corrupt. This is not calling them hypocritical. This is taking the dial to 11 and saying, no. These people are evil. And I think that is kind of the function it had at the time, is taking Democrats in the eyes of MAGA and elevating them not just to these are our political opponents, they have bad ideas and our ideas are better, but to say our political opponents are truly evil and they engage in one of the most universally understood evil things you can do, which is crimes against children, specifically sex crimes against children. So that's kind of the function and the context that I have with it, as it kind of spun off or inspired or was channeled, however you would want to put it, into things like QAnon and then things like the Jeffrey Epstein obsession. That kind of core theme, I think, remained consistent, which is that there is this network of satanic, super powerful pedophiles, and they're all your political enemies. And I think that is like with this Jeffrey Epstein stuff, this obsession over a client list that probably doesn't exist. It would be kind of weird if it did, if Jeffrey Epstein just kept a list of like, what are we to expect? He sat around his island with like a little moleskin journal and was like, all my favorite pedophile friends, and drew little hearts next to them based on how much of a pedophile they were or something, right? It's like, but they expected this kind of list not only to exist, but also like this was going to be incriminating, right? Like this would justify all kinds of like legal actions against people. This would justify, hell raining down on all of their political opponents that they thought were involved in this. So I think that is kind of like what kind of undergirded all that anticipation for these Epstein file releases, and why the disappointment has been so just like catastrophic in certain parts of the MAGA movement. Will, Can I get a gut check on this? If there's anybody I would like gut check myself on this stuff, it would have to be you. So
well, I think you're right. I mean, is sort of like the Epstein client list, or we can also think of things like the idea of like the QAnon, the storm, or whatever. It's like this moment, there's going to be this cathartic moment where my like not only political enemies, but also like my cultural enemies, like Hollywood, whatever, they will be wiped away, and then the world will be exactly how I want it. And so this isn't like people with like actual ties to Jeffrey Epstein, like Les Wexner, like these people who are like powerful in some sense, but are not like mega world figures like Bill Gates, although obviously he had Epstein ties as well. Maybe not a great example.
Yeah.
Maybe Oprah, perhaps. Someone who that they are just like these people they fixate on is like, this is an Epstein person, really with no evidence. But the moment that the client list was supposed to come out was going to be huge, and I think Epstein stuff is a little more respectable to talk about in public because there actually was so much weird stuff going on there, and you come off like less of a crazy person than if you were talking about like Q in 2025 or Pizzagate.
It's more like I read the headlines and I'm suspicious, and less like I read some posts on the internet and now look like
And so I think that's kind of become like the dominant thing. And then suddenly, Pam Bondi comes out and says, it's over. You're not getting Christmas this year, essentially.
So Pizzagate is like, that happens in like, I think it sort of wraps up when the guy fires his gun inside the place, the guy who's since passed away. QAnon is like, starts like when exactly? What is the timeline? Like take us from the Pizzagate obsession to QAnon to when Jeffrey Epstein becomes. So my theory on it, and the reason why I want to start talking about this, I mentioned this to Jared, is that like Jeffrey Epstein is real. This is a real thing.
Certainly more real than like QAnon ever was.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's real. It's based on real pedophilia, right? It's based on real rape and abuse. That is quite shocking. But my theory on this is just sort of this starts around Pizzagate. Pizzagate sort of becomes QAnon. I don't know if you disagree as like a leading expert on it. Sort of mutates. It's sort of like, in video games when you're like killing a boss and then all of a sudden he dies halfway and then all of a sudden he comes like twice as big with spikes on him. Yeah. That's sort of what happens. It becomes QAnon. And then Epstein becomes this big deal, but not necessarily right away. It sort of takes a while for them to give up the fake story and latch on to the real one. So if you could just take us through that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. So, we have Pizzagate got kicking off in, I believe, like October 2016, early October, with the release of as you mentioned, the Russia emails or the Clinton campaign emails by Russia. And then it was pretty much wrapped up by early December after the shooting at Comet Ping Pong, because suddenly it becomes a lot more toxic for people to promote it. It's from sort of a practical sense, it's kind of disproven because the guy tried to get in, didn't find any kids there. And then also the Comet Ping Pong guy starts to sue people like Alex Jones. And so then we see this, and also, that Trump had just won. And so there were other things to focus on. Then October 2017, Trump is kind of mired down in things like the Mueller probe and, he's not building the wall, this kind of stuff. And then suddenly Q pops on the scene and says, actually, Trump is engaged in a battle against the deep state. And as part of the evidence of this cabal, let's dredge up the old Pizzagate stuff that we left to put aside for 10 months. And so then that runs like pretty hot and increasingly hot up until, and really, really gets going in the pandemic, up until Biden wins. And then that's when, Q says, hey, at one point says, like, stop talking about Q because people have kind of keyed in that we're lunatics. Possibly, Q is fearful of federal investigation and says time to wrap up Q. And so then, I think you're right. But the thing to go back a little earlier in 2020 is that Epstein, I believe, dies in the summer of 2020. And so that becomes a huge driver of people to QAnon. But Epstein is also like perhaps the most defensible part of QAnon to talk about. And so I think after the parts about the storm or all the underground tunnels or whatever, the real like kind of hardcore adrenochrome, that stuff falls away. I think the Epstein stuff continues humming, but then, there's Biden stuff. I think there's a lot of COVID stuff that takes up a lot of the oxygen in terms of right-wing media for a while and conspiracy theories. And then after that, you have, then it kind of starts bubbling up again. And I would say 2024.
Right. Jared and I have gone through many times the fact that we were out having an adventure in Manhattan on the day of Epstein's thing. We were partying, you could say, and had an interest. I mean, I think it absolutely captured the imagination of everybody who is politically conscious on the right and the left. Right. I can't remember a story that inspired this kind of fascination in my lifetime, and maybe the only equivalent is like is the Kennedy assassination or something like that, where it just inspires this much creative thinking, because it's hard for people to sort of imagine that this guy had a private island that he was using for these sort of sex with underage women and sort of setting up with these very rich people. You've got royalty, you've got political figures involved. We don't know who did what exactly, not to, get into any kind of defamation territory, but there's a lot of like very famous people, right? There's that famous photo of Bill Clinton, who is, repeatedly associated with Jeffrey Epstein. And I don't remember which magazine it is, but they're both kind of like looking back from like an old desktop computer. So this thing, I think it really kind of inspired a lot of creative thinking in people. And then you wind up in the situation where we are now, where Trump, correct me if I'm wrong, was perceived as a sort of vehicle for finding the truth about Epstein by a lot of his fans.
Well, and that's so bizarre on its own, right? I mean, but yeah, you're right. I mean, Trump was seen in the same way that, we're sending him to kick down the establishment in DC. Well, what is really the ultimate establishment to these people is the pedophile cabal. And Steve Bannon has been out just as we're talking saying, Epstein is like a symbol of who rules us, or this determines who rules us. If you're able to run this cabal, abusing children, committing all these heinous crimes, and the president and the Justice Department are afraid to take you on, well, that's who rules us. And so Epstein also became kind of symbolic more broadly of like populism, or, finding out what's up with Epstein. And yes, Trump was a symbol of like taking on Epstein, despite, being tight with him at one point.
Sure.
All the videos of them hanging out, appointing as a cabinet secretary the guy who gave Epstein the sweetheart prosecution deal the first time. And the explanation for that was always like Trump was bringing attention to the Epstein deal by like bringing these people into the government.
Takes one to know one, baby.
Or he was infiltrating Epstein's cabal. That's why they're hanging.
Is that
out
an
on
extension
this video.
is that an extension of like the QAnon stuff? I mean, because I thought during QAnon that like Trump was supposedly the idea, and again, you're the expert here, was that he was like the vehicle to expose the corrupt pedophilic like tendencies of the elites.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. So in the case of QAnon, Trump, as you said, is elected. Basically, the military approaches Trump and says, you're such a wonderful businessman. We loved The Apprentice. You need to run for office because you're the only guy who isn't like beholden to the cabal. And then, you can team up with us and we'll take down the cabal in the storm. And so already there's this idea that Trump is this, this kind of like crusading messiah figure. And then, Epstein, I think, because again, there's so much genuine weird stuff with him, really becomes like the face of the cabal, or like the big mystery that needs to be solved.
Trump obviously did not end up being a vehicle for it. We talked about Bindergate and some of that stuff before we brought you in. Now, I mean, on the heels of this unsigned FBI memo back to the DOJ that is like, well, we looked at everything and nothing to see here, folks. That's a wrap, And then when Trump gets asked about it, his statements about like, aren't you sick of hearing about this shit already? Like, come on. Epstein this, Epstein that. Oh my God. Like acting like people are losers for caring about it now, even though he promised on the campaign trail that he would like release these files, that Pam Bondi, they deny it now, but seemed, in my opinion, pretty clearly to be like, yes, the client list is on my desk. This client list that probably doesn't exist, actually. And the reaction that I'm seeing or have been seeing over the past week, I would put into two distinct categories: coping and seething. It's two of my favorite categories. Obviously, like there's people that are just furious, like spitting mad, the Laura Loomers of the world, the Gunther Eagleman, who we talked about on a prior episode.
Is Gunther really mad about this?
He's mad,
because that guy, all he does is suck Trump's cock. I'm sorry, but like, I'm sorry. This is a family show, but I'm just surprised to hear he has any dissent at all.
All the little kids covered their ears as they listen to.
There goes our next ad read, Mike. He's mad. It seems like the person they've picked out to blame is Pam Bondi. And then there's also, some of that same almost QAnon-esque 4D chess maneuvering. That's like kind of the talking point that is bubbling up of like, well, he's actually smart to not release this. And this is strategic. And this is like a long-term advantage. Saying without saying, trust the plan. What's your take on the coping and the seething?
Yeah, let me just jump off that thing you just said about like, Trump's doing 4D chess. I was watching Tim Pool, I think Monday night, right after this happened.
As one does.
Yeah, well, honestly, I have to cook so much for the family, and I just like put on Tim Pool in the evening, or like all these characters. I just, my wife will walk in and she'll just say, like, see some, tatted up, dude, and she'll be like, that seems like some guy you'd be watching, so like ex-Marine or whatever.
Meanwhile, the kids are like, Dad, why doesn't the food have any seasoning on it?
Yes, I get locked in. And they had this guest who said basically, I think the reality is because the world is run by the pedophile cabal, Trump cannot dare to take them on. And he realized that, unfortunately, and because the economy would be destroyed. So I guess he decided we're just going to have to live and let live with the cabal. And, and I think that's a great idea. And, a couple of people on the Tim Pool panel were like, yeah, that makes sense to me. So there's an example of the kind of like the 4D chess. I think, I'm glad you brought up Gunther Eagleman. I think there's kind of like a divide between people who are kind of like more provocateur type MAGA people and like who are maybe more focused on like they have to keep like a bit more of an authentic relationship with their audience. So like a Laura Loomer, like a Steve Bannon, versus someone who is like very, but frankly, I think like wants a White House invite or he needs to be very connected to the administration. So Cat Turd, Gunther Eagleman.
Oh yeah, those two have been going at
By the
it.
way, anybody in the audience who's not like on X regularly is like, what on earth?
These are our new. This is like the president's court.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
And I think honestly, I was just watching. It's always going down at the Turning Point USA. It's like the Student Action Summit this weekend, and they had Jack Posobiec, Steve Bannon, and Charlie Kirk on stage. And I think that really summed it up because the different kind of ways to do it. Because Charlie Kirk was saying, I think the real problem here is the media, because the media won't ask Trump enough about Epstein, and that's why he doesn't think it's important. And it's like, what
are you talking about?
Well, the one time they did ask him, and he was like, "Shut up! Don't ask me about that." And then you have Bannon, who's just like, we need a special prosecutor, and really riling up the crowd. And then you have Jack Posobiec, and at one point, and this is maybe not even to the point, but I just found this to be such a fascinating moment. And obviously, you guys have covered Jack a lot. Jack was a Binders recipient.
Yeah, he has that famous picture. Well, it's famous. All the pictures associated with Epstein now are famous, but like, all the pictures of the individual people who were, okay, stop everything. I need to explain to the audience. Basically, a few months ago, what was this, like February, March? What was it? February. All these influencers received binders that were supposedly filled with, it was like Epstein Files Volume 1 or something, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jack was one of them. He was one of the first people to post a picture online of it. I just need to break so the audience knows what we're talking about. Sometimes we talk over everybody's head. But the thing had nothing in it. It was all information. We covered this in a pod back in February, but it had nothing. It was stuff that was already previously released in 2022. So that's what you're talking about here. And then, continue where you were.
Yes. And so the people involved in that, a lot of them ended up with egg on their face because once they looked like, we're here, we got the binders. They had these really iconic photos. And then it turns out basically that Pam Bondi had kind of like hitched them to her wagon and embarrassed them. And so these three guys are on stage, and I just have to read this quote. Charlie Kirk puts his arm around Jack and he goes, "Jack was used." And basically like, they fooled you, Jack. And then Bannon goes, "And like a sap, you believed them." And they're like not joking at all. I mean, this is just like, and Jack just like looks like he's like eating a lemon. He looks so mad that they're owning him.
Oh my God.
So these are the different factions.
Well, I noticed like some of his own followers that maybe, really into this shit and maybe like really online and ready to turn on him. I noticed them just sharing that picture that he posted with his brow gets like especially wrinkled. I don't know if it's all the stress of being a far right bigot, but like it's like it looks like a Brillo pad, and he's like he's holding his thing and he's like making this face. I'm making a face to you guys on Zoom, and they keep sharing the picture. The picture was already cringe, but it became more cringe before he hyped it. Jack can't help but hype anything that is anywhere near him. And so people are now like his own people are sending it to him. It's not just North Korea and Palestine flag avatar leftists, who are also involved and interested in this material, sharing it. It's his own followers. It seems like are trying to get him.
Yeah. Will, a question for you is, a big kind of agitator on encouraging hostility over this has been Elon Musk. Who is, I guess, no longer in the administration, but was for some time, was a Trump booster, is now kind of doing that classic move that we've seen in media a million times, which is like, we're going to go independent because both parties are wrong. And then they're just like Republicans still.
Mm-hmm.
He posted, okay, the reason these files aren't coming out is because Trump is named in them. And then another reason, attacking Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon and Elon Musk have kind of feuded for a while, saying Steve Bannon is mentioned in this stuff too. How do you see like his role in kind of stirring the pot here? Because I think he owns the platform, right? And the platform is at this point now game to promote his posts. How do you understand his role in this?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I think certainly Elon's accusation that Trump is in the files, I'm curious if we ever know the full story behind this DOJ memo. I wonder how much that played into it, of Trump being like, what is he talking about? Like, we need to close this thing now. In terms of like manipulating X, I do think that we've seen over and over that he will manipulate the platform to suit his political advantage. And so, look, he's like paying a lot of these right-wing influencers.
Impregnating some of them.
Well, it's like a host of opportunities.
I'm sorry. Why
are you sorry? It's literally true.
It's true. And so with that in mind, I think there is a like both financial and in terms of engagement advantage for people to really be, going wild over Epstein stuff. Obviously we haven't seen proof that it's, and look, we don't even have to say Elon's manipulating it. We can just assume that I think if you're saying there's a pedophile cover up, you're going to get better pickup than if you're saying, I think Pam Bondi is telling the truth.
I think that's a fair bet.
Elon Musk, right? We just mentioned him. Wouldn't he have like a pretty high standard? I know he has very low standards with almost everything he does, apparently. But like, you can't just say somebody is in the Epstein list without, a president, without risking like a catastrophic lawsuit if there's not some truth to it. Am I wrong?
On one hand, Elon does like to call people pedophiles, right?
Oh, no. He's got a history of that, but it is that's a big bite. That's a big bite to take.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is like we've seen so many twists and turns of this story. But if you just like arrived at it and you said, the president's main bankroll guy and, maybe one of his top advisors is saying, Trump's in the pedophile list, you say, what? Like if Ron Klain had said that about Biden, it would have been treated as a huge deal. Look, I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that Elon would actually know this. He was pretty intimately involved with the administration. And so, and also, as you said, Trump will sue anybody over anything.
And he's got his own workers all over the government, right? Who are feeding him information.
Oh my gosh.
See, I think that this is the core of the Epstein issue here, whereas QAnon like really touched on very few things that felt real. The Epstein thing has a foundation of truth that everyone can point to and look at. And then the rest of it is all little things that can send your imagination so many different directions, like Ghislaine Maxwell's father being associated with Mossad, right? That sends people into like these, all these different directions, and all the other ties, potential ties to Israel that people can point to that may be true or may not be true as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein, but it sends people into all these kind of it sends people spiraling. And then all the famous people, right? Like in Trump's case, it could be real, but.
Yeah, you had it was Prince Andrew, right? It's like He gets asked about it and is like sweating. It says something about how he has a condition where he doesn't sweat. That's weird, right? Like you said, whether it is like foreign or domestic intelligence stuff, all the powerful people that knew Epstein and spoke highly of him before he was, charged the first time, and certainly the second time, or just that he had like all of these clients, right? That his whole thing was like, if you had less than $1 billion, not interested. So it's like he had like the upper crust of society. And aside from Les Wexner, it's pretty opaque. Like there's rumors about like maybe he had some Rockefeller money under his management. Maybe he had this person or that person's money. But it's like we still don't even really understand like how he made all of this money. Right. So
it's like a freelancer in journalism who, is only getting paid like $6,000 a year, but like is living. It's like, where's that coming from?
Yeah. So, Will, I wrote a piece for MSNBC and kind of made this argument, and I'm curious to get your take on it, which is basically that like the Trump administration is no stranger to failed promises, right? I mean, how many things during the first administration and even this administration have they promised and just not fulfilled on? How many times did the QAnon people get their hopes up only to rationalize it away later? But I think this is like potentially way more politically damaging to them. And I think this is a real liability to them. And I don't think Trump going out on TV and saying, aren't you bored of this? Shut up. Like, is necessarily going to work for them in this case, because they've, especially during this Trump administration, you know, they've courted these weird right-wing influencers for so long. Right. I mean, since the early start of the campaign, but they've really taken it up a notch to the point where like Jack Posobiec is traveling with the Pentagon, or like, you know, Mike Cernovich of all people they're like, who do we need to go hold a binder? This guy. You know, it's like they've become so enmeshed with them that I think there actually is like a real political liability, right? It's like they've they've been feeding this bear and they've run out of food to feed the bear, but the bear is still hungry. And now they're realizing they're in a cage with a bear, right? It's sort of the way I think about it. But I'm curious what your take is on it and like how politically damaging could this be? I mean, I expect like almost all of these profiles to eventually turn the corner and come back to polish the boots of Daddy Trump, because they have to, right? It's what their whole like career and notoriety is based on. If he's gone, or like if they are seen as disloyal to him or betraying him, that's like lights out for them potentially. Like Laura Loomer is not going to like make a pivot and then land a job on the news desk at CBS, right? Mm-hmm. Like the free press is not hiring Cat Turd to write columns, right? Like, so there's sort of this like almost catch-22 situation where it's like, do you die on the hill or like die on the other hill, right?
Yeah. And I think the way around that is you have to blame the people around Trump, right? And so you say, as we're seeing, I mean, the knives are clearly being sharpened for Pam Bondi. I mean, and we're in such a weird position where like Laura Loomer's tweets about Dan Bongino threatening to resign, Kash Patel being furious, you know, seem to be pretty reliable. Or at least are like some kind of smoke signal we have to interpret. You know, I knew it was over for Pam Bondi. I mean, it's not over yet, but like, I just saw as soon as Jack Posobiec started saying she was just like Hillary Clinton and saying, what does it even matter about Benghazi? Or now Liz Wheeler, who's one of the other binders recipients, she's saying she's acting like a pick me girl. So, you know, she's kind of getting at here various criticism. But I think that it's a tough situation for these right-wing influencers to navigate. But I think it is really like politically damaging for Trump potentially. This is like such an emotional thing, and it's so much clearer to understand than like Kristi Noem mismanaging DHS or Medicaid cuts or something like that. And then, you know, I think it's really encapsulated by the like shut up already about Epstein quote from Trump that I think can just be sort of endlessly clipped.
This is a point we haven't touched on yet. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts about the fact that the people we're talking about here in Trump's world, in Trump's government, are themselves, you know, influencers, right? Like and I think this has a number of different. I mean, Pam Bondi, no, but like she's basically a tick above influencer in terms of seriousness. But like, you know, Kash Patel is like he's like a grifter. He's like an online grifter. I mean, he does have experience of some kind, but that's like, you know, mostly what the reason he got the job is being an influencer. And Dan Bongino, I mean, yes, a former officer or whatever he was, but you know, an influencer, a guy who would grind up lemons in a blender. For anybody who's ever seen that clip, I don't know, it was years ago. And these are people who had an audience, like people were excited to see them because of their work as influencers. And as influencers, they had to be on board with these pedophilia conspiracies. So I think that like that is really backfiring now, because you have people who are kind of, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, talking about this issue, talking about the pedophilia dungeons, talking about whatever other thing based on reality or fantasy. And now they're the ones who are turning around, like, you know, covering their genitals and being like, we didn't see anything. You know, I mean, I feel like it's really hurting. It'd be almost easier if it was like a real top cop type, you know, who's a Trumpy lifelong FBI person.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we can see the difference between, Todd Blanche, who's the deputy attorney general, who is not really like a MAGA media figure, just came out and he's like, yeah, get over it. This is the memo. That's what we found. Move on. Whereas, Dan Bongino appears to be in a total meltdown over this. I mean, he has taken like a mental health day on Friday to mull whether he wants to resign because he's so mad about it. And I think, even before this, we saw that Bongino was like really obsessed with his public image. He was constantly tweeting like, stop saying I'm not doing anything about like the Jansik pipe bomber or the deep state traders. Like, I'm working really hard. So clearly, I think he's looking into his kind of post-administration career, whether that's, next week or in 4 years. And he's saying like, I can't just like be falling on my sword all the time for Trump.
Yeah. So, Will, as we wrap up here, I'm curious, just zooming out, can I get a vibe check from you on how the first Trump administration is going? Because we've talked about on this show a bit about just kind of the sense that the air has fallen out of the sails here in a lot of ways. I mean, there will always be Trump sycophants who praise him until the moment, I guess, he croaks or something, and probably even still then. I mean, that's just how two-party electoral politics work. It's like they turn into celebrities, larger-than-life people who like will never see wrong done by them. But that's not enough to like win elections or win popular support. This, big, beautiful budget bill or whatever has like some of the worst public opinion polling ever for a single piece of legislation. The ICE raids are declining in popularity quite quickly. And something you said on a previous episode, Mike, I thought was insightful, was like, there was this attitude when Trump came in that like, electing him back in as a felon, is just this ultimate middle finger, like maybe even more so than the first time Trump was elected, to just be like, fuck you, we don't care, this is our guy. And now you have the God, this has got to be like the fourth episode we've mentioned this captive dreamer weirdo, but like his profile picture doesn't have the MAGA hat in it anymore. A lot of these influencers are.
Is it still David Koresh?
He started like a Do account or something. I don't know.
He's got two accounts. One of them is David Koresh without the MAGA hat. I want to just, not to spike the football on that, but we did an episode that was mostly about him, and he clipped it and like shared it so many times that it made it evidence that he was listening and re-listening to it. And then like the next day got rid of the MAGA hat because we made fun of it. It was like, I believe I described him as like a little Muppet with a MAGA hat that you would see on your timeline. And I think he started to feel like, well, I'm a bit more serious of a fascist thinker than that.
but yeah, it's just like a lot of these guys are kind of stepping back, you're starting to see even the big pro-Trump influencers like Tim Pool and stuff occasionally like kind of break character and like get mad at things. And it just kind of feels like when you've been at a party for too long and everybody's just like kind of standing around, they're still having fun, I guess, but like you can tell people are like thinking about like where they're going to go next in the night. I'm curious if you agree with that, if you see it the same way. Obviously, this is just like our opinions for whatever that's worth. What's your read? As somebody who like chronicled the whole first one, the second one, where do you get that same sense, or are there any like big differences between Trump 1 and Trump 2 that stand out to you?
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis. I mean, I think sort of the people who latched on to Trump because it was like cool, and I put that in, quotation marks, but it was sort of like an edgy thing to do.
It was based,
I mean, he was based. And, another group is sort of like the sort of like bro comedian podcasters who seem to be like absolutely manning the lifeboats this week over the Epstein stuff. I mean, Andrew Schultz, who, memorably, I mean, like basement IQ level here, famously gave the quote where he was like, I like Trump because he gets laid, and he says bad stuff. And now he's saying, what do you mean the Epstein Files? Does he think we're idiots? And I think that's like a very powerful idea among this kind of like quasi disaffected voter audience, where they like the idea of being like thought of as an idiot, or that like having your intelligence insulted, I think is like very powerful. And then, Shane Gillis, who is like not quite all the way there, but is similarly saying like, wait a minute, Trump was like really buddies with Epstein though, right? And, I think these are sort of powerful memes that the administration would not really like to be out there. I think it's a classic, like they've exhausted all their political capital, at least for now, getting the beautiful bill across the line. So, we'll see. But I do agree with you that I think, this kind of like crazy fervor and, this exultation over the election seems to have dissipated.
I want to bring up something else on this same point, which is kind of the darker aspects of the Epstein story, at least in terms of online politics and stuff like that, which is there are no shortage of anti-Semitic, like deeply anti-Semitic, far-right people online. Like, in fact, they're growing by the day, I think it feels like to me. And at the same time, we have this obvious horror going on in Gaza, which is, deeply disturbing and it continues to go on and on and on and on and getting so much worse since Trump took power. And Netanyahu being like an essentially completely corrupt, indefensible figure at the helm over in Israel. And you have Trump basically like lathering him up, rubbing his shoulders, telling us this guy's the greatest guy I've ever seen. The Epstein thing there are these really persistent anti-Semitic accounts sort of online. I'm thinking of this guy like Ian Malcolm. I don't know if you're familiar with that. He kind of runs. It's like a Jeff Goldblum avatar, which is ironic because Jeff Goldblum is Jewish, and he's always just trying to fill in like the things around Jews and da 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 da. And they're always now they have sort of an open space here because of the criticisms of Israel that many people share and their own anti-Semitism to sort of link the Epstein list situation and that to Trump. I saw today, like Trump got, the White House got ratioed, to use that term. They did a spin off of the Superman poster with Trump on it, and the White House wrote "The symbol of hope, truth, justice, the American way, Superman Trump," and it got ratioed, for people who don't know what that means, like more likes and retweets for one that is just an AI version of the same thing, where the same Trump is made fat, and he's made really really fat. And instead of the Superman logo, there is the Israel symbol. I can share it in the chat with you guys if you want.
I saw it as well. Yeah,
I also saw it,
and it's like doing numbers, and it says, "Forgive me, not embracing the ableist slur," but it says "fat retard" on it instead of Superman, and it's doing like numbers. And I don't know if the person who posted is an anti-Semitic account. I don't know, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's getting more and more difficult to tell the criticisms of Israel and, just basically anti-Semitism. But I mean, I am starting to believe that wing of Trump's base actually may really eat into MAGA in a pretty serious way. And they also have an obsession with Peter Thiel, who they also, even though he's not Jewish, associate with a lot of that stuff. And that would undercut J.D. Vance. I'm just curious what your thoughts about it is, because it's almost resembles to me like that pesky wing of the Democratic Party that is just like wants to just like destroy everything, whatever that the Democrats get super mad about or whatever. I'm not condemning those people, by the way, but just like from the eyes of Democrats. I mean, what do you think the White House is thinking about people like this, and how difficult do you think it would be to sort of keep this coalition together when you have these people who, are motivated by something else and believe Trump to be beholden to Israel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that that is kind of like the undercurrent here we haven't gotten to, and that's the idea that Epstein was a Mossad agent, and there are Ghislaine Maxwell's father had Mossad ties and all these things, and so that is often what's going unstated here, is that by closing the investigation, it's being seen by particularly like anti-Israel or anti-Semitic elements of the right as like kowtowing to Israel, just as striking Iran was. And so that, I think, is sort of intensifying the anger on the right at Trump.
I think it's like a pretty I gotta say, I think it's way bigger of a deal than anybody is acknowledging publicly, because it's kind of hard to acknowledge, right? It's sort of like, what are we even talking about? There's a bunch of online anti-Semites or whatever, but anybody who spent a lot of time on 4chan and of course Gab and Infinity Chan or 8chan, whatever you want to call it, and whatever back in the day, it just so happens that those forums were spread out, right? There was Trump fans all over the place. But now they're all on X. Everybody's on X. And it's been reported repeatedly how important X is to MAGA now. It's like so important. It's their forum. It's where JD Vance gives his public statements that are like, that are ridiculous. To me, I feel like the fact that a lot of these posts are doing like a lot of numbers, it must be like very concerning to them. And I don't really have a question there. It's just my observation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there is this, and I think you're right to key in on the sort of X is this kind of like MAGA hothouse and what the vibe, and of course now with Trump's arch enemy Elon Musk in control.
So, Will, this seems like a good place to wrap it up today. Thanks for coming on, posting through it, and talking about our favorite topic, which is elite pedophiles at the top of society. Where can people keep up with you, keep up with your work, and follow False Flag, your newsletter for the Bulwark? Yeah,
I mean, I'm on obviously X and Blue Sky. My writing's on thebulwark.com. The newsletter you can find there is called False Flag, and then I'm also on the Bulwark's YouTube account. So I'm a multi-platform operator here. You're doing YouTube now. Oh my gosh, check it out. We're having so much fun. Yeah.
Listeners, if you think Jared and I should do YouTube, please message us directly. It's an internal debate.
Hey, it's Mr. Beast is there, that's where all our peers are.
Our peers, Mr. Beast, and people who like review guitar pedals and like. All right, Will, thanks. We're gonna let you go.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Good conversation with Will. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a good time to remind people of the tip jar in the context of just saying you gotta give. You gotta give, or the site goes dark.
Yeah,
you gotta give, or the site goes dark. Jared.
This is in demand. I mean, it's the show is sold out all over the place, and we just can't make enough of them.
Rick, our producer, is underwater, and this whole thing is gonna go fucking underwater if we don't. If you don't give, you gotta give. That's how you do it. But yeah, great show, everybody. Tip jar is in the where is it? The replies. I don't know the fuck you do. What did you do?
Episode description.
Episode description. It's tip jars in the episode description. We're going to see you next week, everybody.
Take care.
No, not to Epstein Island. Epstein Island. Epstein Island. It's a big club and I don't think we invited. No, not to Epstein Island. Stephen Hawking said in the